I've been preparing for a wedding that I'm going to be performing in Costa Rica of people that I know very well, young, with some little girl when we met her. And so she's getting married, and really godly young man that she's marrying.
Wow.
And that's amazing. So in preparing for it, I was thinking to myself, what kind of advice do I want to give? Because I know the gal who's one of the two daughters that are my neighbors over there. I know that she's not quite as zealous a Christian as he is. And but believe me when I tell you, she's going to be in the thick of it with him in terms of he's going to be a good leader. And so I thought, well, I better do something to remind them that especially in this day and age, that what we're going to do is not a civil union. This isn't a time where we're saying you want to legally be married so that you can, in the eyes of the government, so that you whatever, can have the benefits of being married. That marriage was not only ordained by God in the first place, it was His creation. Not only was it that, but he also wanted, when we got married, he wanted to be the witness. You know how you have a witness to witness that what you're doing, what you're saying, if you're taking a vow or you're doing whatever. When you say that I'm before God, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to be faithful in sickness and in health, and richer for poor, and until death do us part. You're saying that in front of God, who's that's His creation, marriage. So, and I'm going to say it as much for them as I am for, as much for the people who are going to be listening, because it's important to be reminded, or maybe it's the first time any of these people have ever heard this. It was just, we got married, and in that case, when you get married, you find an attorney, and the attorney fills out all the paperwork to make the marriage legal, and a lot of them are female attorneys, and so she'll send it in and make it all legal. But I told them to begin with, I said, if you're waiting to have this big old marriage, big old wedding ceremony and all of the bells and whistles that go along with it, I said, chances are it's going to be a long time before you get married, because that's a lot of money. I said, isn't it more important to marry each other in the sight of God? He's far more important than the government is. Far, far more important. And so as it's going to turn out, it's going to be a marriage ceremony that's going to be performed in the hearing of the attorney. She's going to sit there and we're going to perform the wedding, and then she's going to be the government's witness that this actually took place. But more importantly, it's God who's the witness. And so then I'm probably not going to give all this to them, because you start doing this and you start realizing that there is there is a kind of a, when it comes to talking about marriage and relationships between husbands and wives, there is a word, the S word, that people don't want to say too much about. They don't want to, and that S word is submission. And in Paul writes about it. And if Paul's in, when Paul was writing a letter to the people that lived in Ephesus, so he's writing to the Ephesians. If he's bringing up a subject, it's because he's been told in a previous letter, or he's heard it through the grapevine, that this is a problem that they're having and you need to address it. And so he talks about that wives should submit to their husbands as unto the Lord, and to submit to him in everything, in all things. Not just religious things, not just, oh, he's the spiritual head of our family, and so, but when it comes to the other stuff, I'm much smarter than he is in these areas, and so I'm just going to take control and run with it. And this is, unfortunately, this is what's going on in the world today. And so, and then he talks about that the man, really in another part of another letter, he says, we all should be submitted to each other. In other words, it's not that there's one person who's the king of the hill. Texas joke. Not at all. It's not that the man becomes, sometimes the man gets the idea that, oh, I'm the boss. It's not what that means. It doesn't mean I'm the boss. That doesn't mean you have to do, see, it says right here in the Bible, Pastor John said this, it's right in the Bible. You have to do what I tell you to do. That's not what it says. If any of you have ever been in the military, then you know what submit means. Because you start off as a private, not even a PFC, not a private first class. You're just a private. You're the bottom of the heap. Everybody is above you in rank. Everybody is telling you what to do, from the corporals to the sergeants to the whomever you're around. What that private is doing, using the biblical word here, what he's doing is he's placing himself under the authority of someone else. He's submitting to the authority of his squad leader. He's to his platoon sergeant. He's recognizing that this person is above him in rank and that he needs to submit. Not because that sergeant is so much smarter, because he may not be. Not because he's, this is, by the way, first lieutenants right straight out of college get put in charge. No, second Louis, I'm sorry, you're right, second lieutenant. All of the people that have been in the service for many years look at these guys and go, 30-day wonders. They don't want anything to do with them because why? They don't have the experience. They're reading like out of the book. This is what we're going to do, and some of the stuff. So there's, if they're like Marge's son, Travis, he was the kind that would say, I'm not going to do that. You have to submit to the authority of the person who's in charge of you. Not because they're smarter, because quite often they're really not smarter. Not because they have a lot of more experience, because Travis had much more experience than that lieutenant ever had. But because he's in that position, it's a positional thing. So when a woman marries a man, or a man marries a woman, and he says to himself, I just want a simple woman, basic woman that'll wash my clothes, cook the meals, raise the kids. And so he looks around and he looks for that, and he looks in the United States and he says, nope, there's nothing like that here. So he goes to the Philippines, or he goes to wherever he goes. I don't even think they exist anymore. You still. The man has to submit, even though he's the head of the family, as Christ is the head of the church, right? The body of Christ. But the woman desires to be loved. So the man's job, so Paul says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. But then he says, women desire to men desire to be respected. And they don't need to hear the woman saying every day, I love you, I love you, I love you. But they need to be respected. And so what happens is, you already know. If a man isn't getting respected at home, what's going to happen? Where do you think he's going to go to get respected? Any place but at home. If he's not getting respected at home, he's going to get respected at work by some secretary or whatever there at work. That's what he wants, is just respect for who he is. The woman wants to be loved, and if the man does not show that love to her, and I don't mean romantic love, although sometimes that's, there's a book called The 5 Love Languages. You gotta say to yourself, if she doesn't get this love at home from me, she's open to go find that love some other place. So I can't believe sometimes how relevant Scripture is. Because this is 2,000 years ago, Paul is saying what is absolutely true today. Your marriage and what you do. I mean, to me, I used to say God's got an amazingly great sense of humor. He makes a man and a woman attracted to each other. And then he makes it almost impossible for either one of them to understand each other. That's a sense of humor. I think he probably says to the Spirit and to the Father, let's see how this works. Let's see how this works out. So anyway, I didn't mean to get off on a tangent about this, but when I was preparing and studying about it, I realized how relevant that is even for today. And we also have a very short lesson today. So we're on the very last verses of Mark 15, and then we're going to Mark 16, which is the last chapter in the Gospel of Mark. And it's entitled, Not the Legs. What do you think that means? Not the legs. Well, we're going to find out. I don't know what it was like where you grew up, although I've heard from some of you. But when I was young, I grew up in a Dutch town in Michigan, where everything was closed on Sunday. And I think they even had blue laws in the town, in the other town that we lived in too, where you had to belong to a club to be able to go drink, even as an adult, or drink at home. So you had to prepare for the fact that everything was going to be closed on Sunday by doing your shopping on Saturday. So that meant you filled your tank of gas on Saturday in preparation for going to work on Monday, unless you're just going to get it on Monday. And you went to the grocery store, you did your shopping and did all of that on Saturday because you knew on Sunday everything was going to be closed. Now, to me, this was awesome for the people that worked in these places because they actually had Sunday off. And it wasn't, businesses will work you to death. They'll work you 7 days a week, 12 hours a day if you'll let them. And so it meant that it was a fact of life in that town. And you just had to, you grew up, you just had to live with it. It wasn't that you had to make a decision like this is something brand new. This has been around for a long time. And you just grew up and you knew, that's right, the store's going to be closed tomorrow, so we better do it today.
You didn't even think about it. It's just
No.
the way it was because it was like that here too.
And the stores couldn't ignore the law. They had to comply with it. So even if they were being greedy and they wanted to be open, and I know this is exactly what happened because it started out slow. One store opened up for 3 hours on Sunday. And then it just slowly infiltrated. The good thing about it was that Sunday was maintained as a day set apart for God and family. And boy, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't know. Today, I wonder what kind of pushback there'd be for a town if they decided to do the same thing. Well, you know what would happen. They'd all drive into Austin, and they'd go do whatever they wanted to do.
That or they'd have a riot.
It would be extremely negative. Yeah, that's right. That's right. A great example. During the time of the Israelites, now Israelites, meaning the Jews really before they became a nation, God had told Moses, or should I say, God had commanded Moses to make Saturday, which was the last day of their week. Monday was the first day of the new week for the people that lived in Israel. So God had said, make Saturday, the last day of the week, holy. This day was called the Sabbath. And as you will recall, there's a commandment that says, remember to keep holy the Sabbath. Holy doesn't mean this, the little halo around your head. Holy means set apart. If you're set apart, if your business, if your personal life is set apart for God and for God's work, then that's what it is. In the days of building the temple, all of the articles that they called the furniture, which would be the table of showbread, the little table for burning incense, all of those things were consecrated and made holy because they were being set apart for God's use. So this is Saturday. So when did the Sabbath begin? It began at sunset on Friday. So on Friday when the sun went down, that was the beginning of the Sabbath. And it continued until sunset on Saturday. So when the sun went down on Saturday, basically it was over. Okay. Now, all of this is important for where we're going with this next. The Lord said to Moses, this will be a sign between me and you for the generations to come. So you may know that I am the Lord who makes you holy. The Sabbath was so important that the Lord said, anyone who desecrates it, anyone who kind of like spits in the eye of the Sabbath, must be put to death. Anyone who does any work on that day, because that was part of the Sabbath rule, was there were actually a certain number of feet that you could walk. They call it a Sabbath day journey. It was X number of feet that you could walk, and that was it. You weren't allowed to go gather firewood. You're supposed to have done that the day before for your fire, for cooking. In fact, probably would have been better to cook. Of course, they didn't have refrigerators and whatever. But anybody who did work on that day must be cut off from his people. And that's all in Exodus 31. I tell you all of this because on Friday night, before sunset, the Jews had a tradition, and I don't know if I've ever read, maybe it is in their teachings, that the bodies that had been crucified had to be taken down off the cross before the Sabbath. You couldn't leave the body hanging there all during the Sabbath. Friday was considered the preparation day. So Friday was the day that everybody was running around doing everything they needed to do. And because it was a day of preparation, a man called Joseph of Arimathea is where he's from, he went to Pilate to ask for the body of Jesus. From the various Gospels, we learn that Joseph was a prominent member of the council, or the Sanhedrin, or what I just simply say, it was the Jewish Supreme Court, 70 members. So Joseph of Arimathea was a prominent person. He had the respect of the people. He was also a secret follower of Jesus because he didn't want to put up with what the other people were going to say to him concerning it. There was another secret follower of Jesus that was also a member of the council, who was also helping Joseph in this task of taking the body down. But they said, Pilate said, okay, yeah, he's dead, you can take the body. Take the body down, and then carry the body to the tomb, and the tomb was reasonably close by. It was the tomb that belonged to Joseph of Arimathea. That other person that was helping him, his name is Nicodemus. So I used to say, if you wanted to remember what his name was, he used to come at night to question Jesus. And all of chapter 3 of Matthew is about Nicodemus coming to him at night. So I used to say, just remember Nick at night. That's who it was, and that's when he used to come to see Jesus. Both of these men had not consented to the council's decision about what to do with Jesus and to work toward having him killed. And that's recorded in Luke 23. Since sunset was approaching, and this had been Friday night, time was of the essence. Pilate was surprised to hear that Jesus was already dead, so he called the centurion, the Roman soldier that was in charge of century. He was in charge of 100 men, to verify his death. And the normal way that they verified the death of someone that had been crucified they would take a mallet and they would walk along, and they would break the legs of the people that were on the cross. And without the use of your legs, because your legs are, your feet are nailed to in some cases there's a block of wood under there. In some cases it was just the nail that was put through your feet. In order to breathe, because you're hanging here, in order to get a breath into your lungs, you had to push up. You had to push up on your feet, which are probably already in shock anyway. Take the breath. And then you want another breath, and you push up. So if you broke the legs, you couldn't do that. And so you shortly, suffocated because you couldn't breathe. So you're, gasping for air. So they came to Jesus, and they found that he was already dead. They did not break his legs. Not the legs. Don't break the legs. One of the soldiers took a spear, and he speared Jesus in the chest, into the heart, and blood and water came out, which I am not a doctor, so there's been a lot written on it, but basically that showed that the person was dead. So when the centurion knew about that, came back and said, yeah, he's dead. You can have the body. Pilate gave the body over to Joseph. Joseph took the body, and off they went. So with the help of Nicodemus, he bought some linen cloth. He took the body down, wrapped it in the linen cloth, and he placed it in the tomb cut out of the rock that Joseph had prepared for himself. He had, like the death pre-planning kind of thing. Here's where my tomb is going to be, and this is all taken care of. The tomb was also located in a garden near the site of the crucifixion, so it didn't take very long to carry the body down. It's interesting that the tomb was only used for a very short time. The scripture says that in terms of prophecy, it says that the Messiah would be crucified or would die with two criminals, but buried in a rich man's tomb. And so the fact that Joseph of Arimathea allowed Jesus to be put into that tomb is fulfilling a prophecy that I don't know how else that would come down. And while this drama was unfolding, while Joseph and Nicodemus were rushing to get this done before the sun went down, there were two women that were witnessing this from a distance. They were standing back. One of them was Mary Magdalene, that Jesus had exorcised 7 demons out of her. And the other was Mary, the mother of James and John. James and John's father, Zebedee. So the mother of James and John, Salome and Joseph. These women had followed Jesus throughout his time in the Galilee, and they were prepared to continue the process that Joseph and Nicodemus had started. They were going to come back on Sunday morning. As soon as the sun was up, they were going to be there with all of the spices and the whatever that they were doing. But there was a problem. there was this huge stone, a round stone, and it had a track in the stone, in the base of it. And the stone would roll down easily because the track was at an angle. So the stone would roll down and close it off, but then getting it back up, which most of the time you weren't going to do anyway, the body was going to be in there. This wasn't an issue. So the women saw where Jesus was being laid so that they could come back on Sunday and they'd know where the body was. And when they knew where the body was, because a lot of people said, well, I think the women went to the wrong place. They went to, lot 52. They should have went to lot 53. No, they knew exactly. Had been there. They knew where they were, what they were doing, and where they were going. So they would be in for quite a surprise when it came to Sunday. Quite a surprise. So let's read these 5 verses. It was preparation day, verse 42. That is the day before the Sabbath. So as evening approached, as the sun was about to go down, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent member of the council, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, he was waiting for God to establish his kingdom on earth. So he was waiting. They used to call, they even called people that weren't Jewish that were waiting on the kingdom, they'd call them God-fearing men. He went boldly to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Pilate was surprised to hear that he was already dead, so summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, that he was dead, he gave the body to Joseph. So Joseph bought some linen cloth, took the body down, wrapped it in the linen, and placed it in a tomb cut out of rock. Then he rolled a stone against the entrance to the tomb. And then it talks about Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw that he was where he was laid. So if you look from one scripture to the other, the account of in this case, the burial of Jesus, you'll sometimes pick up other little pieces of information. Now, there is in Israel today, and we were with a tour when we went, and you're taken to what they call the Garden Tomb. And it's, kind of a beautiful garden, has a walkway around it, and then there's the tomb. The rock is rolled back, and you can walk into the tomb. And you really don't know. There are some things that are called the historical sites and the traditional sites. So depending on who you believe, the Catholic Church has everything all kind of locked up in terms of the holy sites. So whether or not that was the actual tomb or not that Jesus was put into doesn't really matter so much. The fact that you could see, I've also read that the tomb had an entryway, and then the place where the body was buried or laid out was further in.
Somebody told me that the tomb was not part of Israel
Well, the Garden Tomb is right, I mean, basically in Jerusalem. You can see where it's at. Now, if you're talking about Bethlehem, where Jesus was born, that is under control of the Arabs.
Okay.
So when you take a tour bus, you come up and there's this huge concrete wall, and there's guards with, automatic weapons sitting up on their little, look like a lifeguard stand kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe I misunderstood what she was
Yeah.
saying.
And they drive you up, and you get off the bus, you walk across the border, and you get onto an Arab bus. You kind of see what's going on here. You get onto the Arab bus, and then they take you to the Church of the Nativity, which again is another Catholic church. And then also they take you to the Uncle Hakim's tourist trap, where you can buy jewelry and trinkets and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, Bethlehem is no longer. It's just the way it is. But it's a very surreal experience. Let's put it that way. I remember the time that I went, people were so afraid. They were afraid for you. They'd say, "Aren't you afraid to go there?" And I said, "No, not really. If it was that terrible, they wouldn't even allow you into the country." But as much as they still want the tourist dollars, they still, if it's a war zone, you're not going to be allowed to go in. But anyway, very interesting. So when I'm reading these things, part of this is kind of pricks your memory, and you remember what you saw when you were there. But I will tell you one last little tidbit. The Jews have no problem with the Arabs living in Israel, as long as they, I don't know if it's an oath or whatever they take, but they have to agree that they're not going to try to undermine the government of Israel, and they'll allow them to live there. And so the tour bus driver, of course, is Israeli, and we're driving. He's an older guy, and we're driving along the road, and he says, "You see that area over there? That's the Arab section. Broken down cars, trash, whatever. Israel, where the Jews live, is neat as a pin. Neat. So there's no trouble figuring out whose neighborhood you're in." Yeah, exactly. And at the time that, and I went with Ray, the guy that owns Ray and his wife that own the RV thing next door, that gave us the possibility to build a church here. And so he, when we went, he was there to see a lot of the historical, artifacts and excavations and whatever, which I have some interest in too. But so. There has been a movement of Jews from all over the world that are returning to Israel, and if they can, prove that they're, I don't know how they prove it, but if they do, then the government will actually give them a certain amount of money to establish, to get a house and do whatever. And so that's kind of what's going on. There's so there's a lot more than what meets the eye. When we were there, the historical thing that was going on at the time was that the Gaza, known as the Gaza Strip, in the Bible it's where the Philistines lived. Now it's where the rockets are being shot out from the Gaza. The Gaza was turned over to the Arabs, and they made the mistake of thinking we can have peace with them by giving them this land. You don't negotiate with terrorists, and that's exactly what was going on. So now they shoot rockets, and they just finished with another war, right, going on between the two of them. So when I was there, they had turned over. So there were Jewish families living in Gaza, and they were taken out, lost their homes. They were going to be replanted in other part of Israel, and all of the kids were. I saw talk about surreal things. We were staying at the King David Hotel, so they do remember King David, and here's all these yellow school buses parked out in front of the hotel, and I didn't know the timing of what was going on, and I said, "Where are all these kids? Kids are here." Yeah, these are the kids that were displaced from Gaza, their parents and them. And the government was putting them up in the hotel until they could find housing for them. And so they were in this hotels, and a really nice hotel, this huge buffet thing, that you went through. So in the morning, when I saw a couple of the kids, and they're all, grew up learning English. So I said to one of them that looked like he was maybe 15, and I said, "I'm very sorry that you lost your home." And he said, "Yeah, well, kind of like it is what it is. Nothing that we could, but they'll be reestablished." The Gaza, by the way, is right on the Mediterranean coast. I mean, it's, if it wasn't for the fact that you got terrorists living there now, it would have been a beautiful place. So that's kind of the kind of thing that was going on at the time, and it'll continue to go on like that. Okay. All right. So let's